Right, good morning. Paul Cappiello here in the backyard with a little more home gardening today. We're going to talk about container gardening. This is the time of the year everybody wants to start planting their containers. And so we're going to talk about how to do it and get the most out of them. A week or so ago, Jacob Stidham, our greenhouse nursery manager, did a great spot on potting mixes and things like that. So I won't go over that. I've got my bag of potting mix here. The first thing I always recommend, just go get yourself a good quality bag of potting mix at a garden center. It already has fertilizer in it most times. It works best, it saves you a lot of time, and your plants will be much happier than trying to make your own. But aside from going out and buying mix, drainage is the most important thing in containers. One of the reasons you don't use garden soil in a container and you use a soilless organic mix is mineral soil is just too fine a texture and it holds too much water, it doesn't drain well. And so we're going to talk a little bit about drainage. This is my home lab here, very exciting, very high tech. But we're going to show you how water is held in container soils and how it's not held. So to help you visualize all this. Now we could do this all with a bunch of soil and potting mix, but it's a lot cleaner to just use a good old brick sponge, because sponges are great analogs for soil structure. They've got various size, pores, and things like that. So it's a really good analog to demonstrate how water works in a soil. Now when you have a soil and you water it, the water percolates through all the pores, and it's held in the soil by the charges on the water molecules and the charges on the sides of the pores in the soil. So the polar molecules, or negative charge on one side, positive on the other, interacts with the surface of the soil, or the sponge in this case, and it helps to hold the water in those pores and keep it from completely draining away. The larger the pores, the more the water runs out and drains. The narrower pores, the more tightly the water's held. The other thing is, the longer the drainage distance is, the longer that column of water is, the more will drain out. Basically, you can think of it as the more mass of that continuous column of water that gravity's working on, the more it pulls against those charges and pulls the water out. So a quick little demo of that: if you take this sponge, it's saturated, I had it in the bucket there. The drainage distance is whatever this is, about 1.5 inches or so. And you can see there's really no water draining out of that now. It's pretty much drained, all it's going to drain. But if I turn it on its side, I've basically increased the drainage distance to about 4 inches. And you can see more water is coming out. It's the same sponge, it's the same amount of water, it's just that it's a longer column, and so you've got more water draining out. And if I let that drain, it's mostly finished draining now. If I flip it again, you can see what happens when I make it an even longer column of water. Again, the same pore sizes, the same distribution. You got loads more water draining out of it. So what does this mean to us in containers for our plants? Number one, again, you've got to use something that has large pore sizes, like an organic soilless mix, not a mineral mix. And taller containers drain better than short, wide containers. Okay, now second demonstration. Got my very high-tech cooling rack here and my bucket and a couple of sponges here. And what we're going to do is, these are all saturated. I'm going to put them here on my cooling rack, which normally has cookies on it. And I'm just going to stack them up. And these are basically going to function like multiple layers of soil or mix in your pot. And you can hear the water draining away. And we're just going to give that a minute to drain. Hopefully they won't fall over. There we go. So we're just going to let that drain until it stops. So while that's happening, I'll point out a couple things over here on your right. You can see the kind of containers that I use. The giant one, that's about a 36-inch diameter container. The smaller one's 24 inch. Biggest mistake I see people make with containers at home is they're too small. Bigger is always better. It means you water less frequently, the plants are happier, and you just get a much better display. Even here, it's always fun to live in Kentucky and have friends who work in the bourbon business, the half bourbon barrels. I don't know what the diameter, it's got to be 30 inches or so. Much happier. Plants are much happier in those giant containers. Okay, now back to the Mr. Wizard setup here. There's still a little bit of water draining out of the sponges, but most of it has trickled away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these sponges one at a time, and I'm going to squeeze the water into my high-tech sciencey beakers known as our kitchen water glasses, just to show you how much water is held in each layer of our mythical soil mix. And I'll see if I can get it all to go in there. Alright, that's about what's coming out of there. Second layer. Most of it in there again. This is a highly scientific process, I don't know you can tell. Layer 3. Layer 4. We're almost there. Ooh, look at that. More water there. And then our last one. Missed a whole bunch of it, but I think you get the point. Obviously, most of that water hangs up at the bottom of the pot, or the lowest level of the potting mix. And that's what we call a perched water table. You've got the charges of the water molecules and the soil or the potting mix holding that column of water. Gets to the bottom and it just kind of hangs there until there's enough water builds up to overcome the charges on those molecules and break that perched water table. So there's basically a layer of water that hangs out, almost saturating the potting mix at the bottom of the pot. The reason that's so important is we all learned this, right? When you plant things in a pot, you always put gravel in the bottom for drainage, right? Well, the problem is when you do that, those pores are so large compared to the potting mix that the water really doesn't stay in there. It basically raises your perched water table however many inches worth of gravel you have in there. So what you end up doing by putting gravel in the bottom of your pot is you raise the perched water table, which means you decrease the volume that the roots can use in the pot. So the bottom line is, get a big pot, buy a good quality bag of soilless potting mix that has fertilizer in it. Don't put any gravel in the bottom of your pot and your plants will be much happier. So that's Mr. Wizard in the garden today. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll do another one of these next week.